You guys, Erin here, back with another moon update for you. But first, I want to say a very special thank you to all of you who showed up for the astrology Zoom party we had a couple weeks ago. That was so much fun for me. I just couldn't believe how many people showed up. We just had such a good time. And by the way, if you missed it, we did record it and it is posted on my YouTube channel just from a couple weeks ago. You can go find it. I think they labeled it Astrology Zoom Party, something like that, where we talked about how solar eclipses work. Okay. And I also talked about how to apply these eclipses to your own natal chart. Okay. So again, I'll be doing something like that again. But for now, let's talk about what we've got coming up here on Friday, May 5th. We are having a lunar eclipse. Okay. This is a full moon south node lunar eclipse in the sign of Scorpio. So in this recording, what I'm going to do is I'm going to break down the sign of Scorpio for you. I'm going to tell you how to work with this kind of transit to really benefit from it. I'll also pull up the chart and I'll be showing you some other astrological forces that we will be receiving around the time of this full moon eclipse. And I will also be talking about certain parts of the body that are ruled by the sign of Scorpio, because these parts of our body become more sensitive when the moon transits through the sign of Scorpio, especially when it's a full moon in the sign of Scorpio. And I'll also be talking about certain herbs or herbal remedies and stuff like that to help support these parts of our body through this kind of transit. And I'll also be talking about gemstones that really resonate well with the sign of Scorpio and how to use them for this lunar transit. Okay, so for starters, this is, again, it's a full moon. Anytime that we have a lunar eclipse, we have to be having a full moon. Okay, I know a lot of people are not aware of that, but we have to have a full moon in order to have a lunar eclipse. And what makes it an eclipse, obviously we have a full moon every month. What makes a lunar eclipse different than the average full moon is it means that either the north or the south node has to be right next to the moon. So for this lunar eclipse, it is the south node. Okay, this is very powerful energy that's going on here. So this takes place, this full moon peaks on Friday, May 5th at 10:34 a.m. Pacific time. So again, this is in the sign of Scorpio, 14 degrees Scorpio. Now, in the hours leading up, even the days leading up to this full moon, this is, yes, it's an eclipse, but it's still a full moon. It's still the peak of a growth cycle. Okay. It's still the peak of a growth cycle that began approximately 6 months ago when we had a new moon in the sign of Scorpio. Now, this is the full moon. So with the hours leading up, the days leading up, this is a time to honor our growth that we have experienced that are related to this sign of Scorpio. Okay. But also, as soon as that moon starts to wane, if it peaks at 10:34 a.m. Pacific time, as soon as it starts to wane at 10:35 a.m. Pacific time, that's when we want to let go of any scorpionic energy that is not serving us. Okay. So this sign of Scorpio, this is what we call the fixed water sign. Very, very intense energy. Okay. Very magnetic and very powerful energy. The sign of Scorpio is what we call the fixed water sign. Now, with all the fixed signs, they tend to do things with a steadfast way, like with a persistency and consistency. Okay, that's one of the things that I love about this sign of Scorpio is its ability to work consistently. But also, the element of water brings in the heavy emotions. Okay, all the water signs, Cancer, Scorpio, Pisces, they're all very much associated with emotions. And because Scorpio is the sign of intensity, this is a sign of intense emotions. In fact, the moon is considered to be debilitated in the sign of Scorpio. But the reason for that, I mean, there's really a number of reasons for that, but really it's because the sign of Scorpio does feel things so intensely, and the moon in and of herself, she rules our moods and our emotions and our intuition. Okay. A lot of people who are born, not everyone, because there are things that counteract this, but for the most part, when people are born with their moon in the sign of Scorpio, they can feel things very, very deeply, very intensely. They have to deal with very intense emotions. Okay. Now, maybe that's something you've been working on. Maybe you've been trying to work through your emotions in a very healthy way. In fact, okay, so the sign of Scorpio, it's ruled by Pluto and Mars. And to be very clear here, in ancient astrology, it's ruled by Mars. In modern astrology, it's ruled by Pluto. In my opinion, it's ruled by both. I do think a lot of astrologers would agree with me on this, and I'll tell you why. So this sign of Scorpio, again, I keep seeing this word intense because it's the sign of intensity. Okay, it's a sign of desire. And a lot of that comes from, all right, Pluto really does rule our spiritual drive. Okay. It rules our psyche and has a huge influence. Pluto is the influencer of power, but the power comes from transformation. Okay. Like really the sign of Scorpio, and I'll get deeper into this a little later on, but the sign of Scorpio rules the excretory system. It's all about flushing things out. It's about degeneration and then a more powerful regeneration. And a lot of that is deep spiritual, like shadow work. Okay. And that comes from Pluto. That is Pluto's influence there. Pluto rules the transformation, rules influences things that are going to go through a death and then a more powerful rebirth. That's Pluto. Now, Mars rules our physical drive. Okay. Now, the sign of Scorpio certainly has a very strong spiritual drive and a strong physical drive, especially for being a water sign. In fact, the sign of Scorpio in and of itself can have really good longevity if it can keep flushing the body out, if it can keep the body clean, because it gets empowerment through that kind of process of flushing things out and bringing in more fresh, powerful new beginnings. That's what gives it its drive. Okay. And this is one of my favorite signs of the zodiac because it is so intense. It's also one of my sister signs as a Pisces here. Okay. Now, also this sign of Scorpio, I mean, it's most commonly represented by the scorpion. And I mean, when you think about it, that just makes sense. The scorpion that has a lethal pinch. This sign of Scorpio can certainly have a lethal pinch. Okay. So not to say that every single person who's got their sun in Scorpio is going to be, super fierce and magnetic and have a lethal pinch, but a lot of them do. And a lot of them can. And a lot of them, if they know how to work with it, only utilize it when it is, for the greater good. Okay. Because that can be a very powerful experience for people. But again, okay, it's sometimes maybe too powerful. Again, I'm going to get into this, but as soon as that moon starts to wane, if you have been a little too fearful or putting a lot of fierce or power out there and lashing out at people, as soon as this moon starts to wane, it's time to let some of that go. Okay. Now, also this sign of Scorpio, again, it's very, very magnetic. Okay. The sign of Scorpio is over here. Taurus is over here. They're opposite each other. The polarity between these signs is said to be the most magnetic polarity we can experience. Okay. We've got the sun in Taurus and we've got the moon in Scorpio. We've also got the nodes going through these zodiac signs. There's a lot of magnetism going on. Very, very powerful and intense energy. Okay, we might want to be a little mindful of our emotions and that sort of thing around. Of course, we all experience this. I really want people to understand this. Of course, we all experience this as a collective. Okay, we're all receiving the same energy from the heavens. Okay, we're all receiving this full moon, south node, lunar eclipse in the sign of Scorpio. However, it's so incredibly unique to each and every one of us. And so much of this depends on your own natal chart. Okay. And a really good trick is to just get familiar with your houses. And personally, when it comes to these lunar transits, I like working with the whole sign house system. But if you like working with Placidus, then you'd want to see exactly where 14 degrees Scorpio comes through in your natal chart. I think it's 14 degrees and 58 minutes for this full moon. But regardless, you would look to see which house. I mean, it could be coming through your house of career or your house of communication or your house of transformation or your house of self. If you're a Scorpio rising, my goodness, this is a very transformational transit for you. Okay. Could be coming through your house of karma, your house of money, your house of physical health. There's all these different areas of your life that it could be coming through. When you get a reading with me, I offer you a free video recording of the reading where we pull up the chart. I show you everything that's going on in your chart, as a person. So you can always go back to that recording and see where anything astrological is coming through, what area of your life it is being activated by what's going on up in the heavens. Okay. And also, do you have anything in your natal chart near 14 degrees Scorpio? Okay. Your sun or your Mars or you've got Mars. That's very intense. Maybe you've got something opposing that near 14 degrees Taurus, or maybe trining it at 14 degrees Cancer or Pisces. This is why it's so good to get familiar with our natal chart. Some people are just naturally more sensitive to intense astrological forces, and some people aren't so much. So again, it just depends. And some people might be hit super hard by this full moon, but not the next one. Because again, it just so much depends on our chart. So there's that. Oh, and if you would like to schedule a reading, please just schedule straight through my website. If you go to erinwageastrology.com, you can schedule straight through my website. Okay. Now the fact that this is a south node lunar eclipse. This is what's really important here, because we talked about this is a time to honor our growth. Like if you've been going through the very powerful transformation. And this is a time to honor that. Or maybe you're feeling good and strong and powerful. This is a time to honor that. Okay. Or maybe you're feeling extra magnetic, or sign of Scorpio actually has a lot to do with our sexual energy. And as long as you're using it in a healthy way, then that's a time to honor that. If you've experienced some good, strong growth with your sexual experiences and how you perceive yourself in that area of your life, this is a time to honor that growth. But as soon as this moon starts to wane, 10:35, okay, really even before that, that is the time to let go of stuff that's not serving you, that is related to this sign of Scorpio. Now, again, the sign of Scorpio rules the excretory system. That's what it's good at. It wants to flush things out. And not only that, but this is like a huge opportunity for doing this sort of work, because the South Node, again, that's what I mean is that I'll pull up the chart and show you in a minute here, but the moon's here, the South Node's here, they're next to each other. The South Node is where celestial energy goes out. Okay. It can be described as a drain point. And so with that said, this is coming through the sign of Scorpio and conjunct the South Node, ready to take, things that are not serving you away. And I personally have had the best results. And as I've said so many times, I would not continue to be doing this after so many years. I think it is 7 years I've been doing this, pulling out my journal every single time we have a new moon or a full moon. I pull my journal specifically for a full moon. I pull my journal in the hours leading up, or, that's not convenient for you, days leading up to. And if you miss it, or if you're watching this video a day or two after the eclipse, it's still a huge opportunity to pull out your journal, write down the growth that you are grateful for, that you've experienced that's related to the sign of Scorpio, but also write down what you want to let go of. Okay. That's my very strongest recommendation. And of course, I always like to take the gemstones that resonate well with the sign of the moon is transiting through and put them on top of my journal. Okay. Now let's see here. Let's just go ahead and pull up the chart. Let's start going through the chart here. So for those of you who are new to my recordings, I work with geocentric Western astrology. So with that said, what we're looking at here is basically a snapshot of the tropical zodiac at the time of this full moon lunar eclipse. Okay, now geocentric, we put Earth right here in the middle. These guys right here, these are the symbols for the celestial bodies. Okay, like where I'm moving my mouse, that's Uranus. Here's the sun. Here's Mercury. Over here is Venus. Over here is the moon. And when we go in the wheel just a little way, these are the symbols for the zodiac signs that all these things will be beaming through onto Earth at the time of this transit. Okay, so here's the moon coming through 14 degrees and 58 minutes Scorpio. We really don't need to focus on the minutes right now or for this recording at all. Okay, so anytime that we have a full moon, it means the sun and the moon are at opposite sides of the zodiac. Okay, here is the sun at 14 degrees Taurus. They are exactly opposite each other. Again, that's what happens every time we have a full moon. And that's in part why full moons are so incredibly powerful. We got the two brightest lights opposing each other, facing each other. They're embracing the growth, the growth. They're ready to let go of what's not being served, okay, as that moon starts to wane. Now, also, here is the South Node, where I'm moving my mouse, and here is the North Node. They are always opposite each other, okay? So when we have a lunar eclipse, it means the sun and the moon are opposite each other. And it means that either the North or the South Node is going to be right next to the moon, and either the North or South Node is going to be right next to the sun. Okay. I hope that makes sense. Everybody's opposite each other here. Okay. So, and again, that's that South Node that I'm talking about. That's what takes celestial energy out, and it works with extreme force in the sign of Scorpio. We won't have this opportunity, well, really ever again, but, this kind of intense opportunity for probably another 18 years or so until this South Node is back in that sign of Scorpio. Okay, so let's talk about this sun over here in the sign of Taurus. This is so wild. All right, so the sign of Taurus, I mean, here's the symbol for the sign of Taurus. As you can see, we've got a lot of Taurus energy going on right now. The sign of Taurus in and of itself is the fixed earth sign. Now, when we say fixed, we're talking about stability. Again, the energy that wants to do things steadfast way, wants to do things with consistency. And we bring in the element of earth, okay? Earth is stable, okay? All the earth signs tend to be, good at taking care of the earthly responsibilities and being disciplined and that sort of thing. But this sign of Taurus, which is generally like the most stable, slow-moving, patient sign of the zodiac is getting hit, okay, with a lot of kind of bizarro stuff. If mostly what I'm talking about here is this right here is Uranus, which we've talked a lot about this. If you've been following my videos for a while, then you know that Uranus is going through Taurus and creating some very strange energies, because that's what Uranus does. Uranus's influence is spasmodic, electrical, rules over things like technology, brings instant surprises, brings revolutionary changes. Okay. But it's very like zappy energy that comes from Uranus. So basically, this sign of Taurus has been getting zapped by Uranus. I think it's been since 2000, maybe late 2017, early 2018, Uranus entered into the sign of Taurus. The sign of Taurus rules money, material possessions, values, and agricultural systems. We are seeing very abrupt and technological changes to our financial systems, to our value systems, and to our agricultural systems. That's a huge part of that is because Uranus is going through the sign of Taurus. Well, it just got even more exciting because here's the sun, which is right next to, basically the sun shining his light on Uranus and making that just a bigger deal in and of itself. Then we've also got Mercury in retrograde going through the sign of Taurus. Now, Mercury has so much to do with our mental function. I mean, he really is the messenger of the gods. Okay, the one that has so much to do with our communication skills. Basically, we receive information through Mercury's energy. Mercury files that information somewhere into our conscious awareness. And then when we want to communicate that information, Mercury goes in, finds that file, brings it back out for us. And so when Mercury's in retrograde, that stuff isn't functioning as well as we would like for it to. And of course, again, everybody's going to be unique. Some people are heavily affected by Mercury retrograde. Some people don't even notice. And a lot of times it depends on what zodiac sign it's going through. But here we have the sign of Taurus that wants to be stable. It's the bull, okay? The bull that doesn't want to budge. And it's like getting electrocuted by Uranus. And then Mercury's retrograding through it. Then we've got the North Node, which that's where celestial energy comes in, making all this stuff stronger through that sign of Taurus. And this right here is Jupiter. Jupiter is the great expander. Okay, Jupiter, it makes everything a bigger deal. Whatever he touches, he makes it a bigger deal. Does a lot, but Jupiter is also a very wonderful energy. It's a great benefic, but it also can be a little bit aggressive because it is, especially when it's so close to all this other energies. Jupiter is still in the sign of Aries. That's why this symbol is different than these ones. They're still close, even though they're in different zodiac signs. Jupiter is still making that stuff a bigger deal. And in fact, Jupiter's only in Aries, I think, for like another week or maybe even less than that after this lunar eclipse. Jupiter's approaching all this stuff. And in fact, in a couple of weeks, you'll see me putting out a recording talking about the new moon in the sign of Taurus, where, whoa, with so much Taurus energy getting rattled by all this stuff. So there is that. Okay. Not only that, but I know I've mentioned this plenty of times, but Jupiter has a very big influence on our liver. Okay. And going through the sign of Aries, our livers might be a little hot, a little irritated. It's be some, again, so much of it depends on our own natal chart. It depends on what you've been putting in your body over the last year, 2 years, whatever, or your whole life. But regardless, it's just something else to be mindful of. Okay. Now let's briefly touch on Venus over here. She's finishing up in Gemini, which, okay, when Gemini is really the sign of communication. And when Venus is the influence of love. Okay. She's lovely energy. She can kind of remedy things and that sort of thing. But going through the sign of Gemini, that can be a really good time, generally speaking, for sharing information or to be, writing an article or somehow, launching a website, that sort of thing. But not when Mercury is in retrograde. I would hold off until Mercury is in retrograde. I think I took a note on that. No, I didn't. I think Mercury is in retrograde for another couple weeks, something like that. I can't remember off the top of my head right now, but I don't know that I necessarily want to launch a business meeting or something where communication is super important, even though it would be, generally speaking, a good time to do it while Venus is going through Gemini, but I wouldn't really encourage it while Mercury's in retrograde. Okay, so let's see here. Next, we'll talk about Mars. Mars is kind of an important key player in this transit because, again, Mars is one of Scorpio's rulers. So Mars is going through the sign of Cancer, which definitely, we're already experiencing a full moon in the sign of Scorpio, intense emotions, that sort of thing. But also this the sign of Cancer has so much to do with our emotions, because the sign of Cancer is ruled by the moon. Okay, I don't mean to overwhelm anybody with too much information here, but the sign of Cancer is ruled by the moon. And that said, the sign of Cancer is very much associated with having emotions. Okay, it's the motto for the sign of Cancer is I feel. So Mars rules our physical drive. Mars is dominant and aggressive, okay? And can sometimes lead to frustrations. And this very well could be revving up people's emotions, especially while we're already having a full moon. Now, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of really beautiful things. And if you're using this energy, appropriately, this could be a fantastic transit. But just be mindful of your own emotions and those around you. Okay, so that's my very strong recommendation. Okay, now also let's talk about Saturn going through Pisces. Saturn is the bringer of reality, practicality, discipline, responsibilities, and Pisces is the mystic. Pisces is the mystical energy, the spiritual one. And I feel like the sign of Pisces is probably kind of tripping out a little bit right now, because so Saturn's trying to bring the hard reality to this sign of Pisces, which also I don't want to forget to mention this. The Saturn is going to be in the sign of Pisces all the way until March of 2026. Okay, and through that transit, I do feel like a lot of people, the reality of the sorrows in the world are going to come into the conscious awareness. Okay, so that's, it's one of those things where we got to see it, we got to feel it, and that's how we heal it, and try not to get too caught up in the sorrows of it. But the real positive thing that I'm seeing here, okay, talking about this right here is Neptune, which is Pisces ruler. Neptune is what makes Pisces so mystical and spiritual. Okay, now with Neptune going through Pisces, it's a lovely spiritual energy. I mean, it's like tenfold. It's extremely mystical and spiritual. And I do feel like that's having a huge impact on people having these very, very powerful spiritual awakenings. But it's also, as I've mentioned so many times, because I'm just seeing it with my own eyes, is a lot of kind of like charlatan stuff going on, and delusions, and people thinking stuff that's real when it's really clearly not real, and just a lot of magic going on. Okay. And if you've been following my channel at all, then you probably know that I'm by nature a very spiritual person. I am a Pisces. I got Neptune on my ascendant and a lot of other things that go on there. I'm a very spiritual person, but I also understand how important practicality is. And what I like about Saturn going through Pisces, here I am always trying to find the optimistic twist on things. I like that Saturn may be kind of bringing the hard reality to people. Like, hey, also one more thing to mention here with both these guys going through Pisces is I'm sure a lot of my listeners and friends and loved ones already know that having spiritual awakenings is not just rainbows and butterflies. There's hard work that comes with it. And sometimes we end up having to, not having to lose friends that we've been friends with for a long time, that sort of thing. A lot of that is going on. So just be mindful, just be aware that these are influences that we're receiving, and we receive them with purpose. Okay. Not only that, but this beautiful trine going from Saturn down here to the South Node, that again, the South Node, that's where energy goes out. So with that said, like flushing out the stuff that's not working for you, flushing out, especially stuff that's not working for your spiritual practices, or maybe there's a certain person that's giving you a hard time because of your spiritual practices, anything that involves something that's not working for you and your spirituality or faith, it's a good time to flush that out while Saturn is trining the South Node. Okay, so there's that. Now also, let's talk about Pluto, which goes into retrograde on May 1st. I'm making this recording on April 30th. So I think Pluto goes into retrograde tomorrow, maybe the next day. Regardless, by the time this full moon hits, then Pluto's going to be a retrograde now and freshly into retrograde. Wow. Okay. Ooh, a lot of tense energies going on here. Again, obviously, we're having a full moon. That's already intense. It's an eclipse. That's very intense. It's in the sign of Scorpio. That's extremely intense. Then we've got Pluto. When Pluto goes retrograde, it's especially Pluto and Uranus, those two. I mean, when anything goes retrograde, it's a big deal, but especially Pluto and Uranus. Okay, because Pluto Again, he rules our spiritual drive, our psyche, and sometimes Pluto is referred to as the planet of power. Okay, is powerful. The power has to come from transformation, but regardless, when Pluto goes retrograde, it's like, okay, this is the best way I can describe it. In Greek mythology, Pluto is Hades, the ruler of the underworld. Okay, this is deep, dark, like shadow work we're talking about here when we're talking about Pluto. Think about when Pluto goes retrograde, it's literally like Hades, the ruler of the underworld, driving backwards. And not only that, but driving backwards into the energetic. Pluto's going to go into the 29th degree of Capricorn soon here. And things should get very interesting. Okay, as a collective here. I will say this though, I do think that there's going to be some strong intensities coming up here in 2023, but I think 2024 is going to be way more transformational and way more intense than 2023. And part of the reason I say that is because of what Pluto is doing. I'm not going to go too deep in all that stuff, but okay, the benefits of this, again, working through our own personal transformational process and doing shadow work, going deep within. And, you know, there's something else I should mention here. Okay, I'm trying to figure out. Well, let's just quickly mention Chiron. Chiron going through the sign of Aries. This is something I mentioned a million times. Chiron is the wounded healer. He's going through the sign of self. This is a really good time for self-healing. Okay, there's a lot more that can be said about that, but I like going deeper when I can see your own natal chart and applying it directly into your own personal life. But something else to mention here, just looking at the whole darn thing, the whole picture here. Okay, this sign of Scorpio can, because it is so intense, and because, you know, this moon being conjunct the south node, and as soon as it starts to wane, and the sign of Scorpio is a sign of transformation because of all these things, and Pluto going to retrograde, the sign of Scorpio can deal with things like jealousy or deep, dark, hidden secrets. Like, this is a really good time to be letting go. If you're somebody who's going to that sort of thing, jealousy is just such a, it's such a horrible thing for people to go through. It's like a horrible vibration to experience. And this is a perfect time to let go of that sort of thing. Okay. Or again, like the secrets or shame, that sort of thing, being let go through this transit. Again, as soon as that moon starts to wane. Okay, so there's that. All right, so let's talk about body parts. All right, so the sign of Scorpio, as I think I mentioned earlier, rules the excretory system. Talking about, okay, it rules the sweat glands, it rules the colon, rules the bladder, it rules the nose. Any part of the body where things go out is ruled by the sign of Scorpio. But the sign of Scorpio also rules the genitals, okay, for male and female. And all these parts of our body become more sensitive when the moon transits through the sign of Scorpio, but especially when it's a full moon in the sign of Scorpio. Okay, so some things to mention here. First of all, I would be very mindful with your sexual energy, okay? And not only that, but for some people, they might be really heavily affected. Like, things might not feel so great in that way because the south node's going to the sign of Scorpio and it's right next to the full moon, and some people might not be experiencing the best sexual kind of energy through this lunar transit. So that's just something else to, you know, just pay attention to. But more importantly, here's the deal. So this sign of Scorpio, because it is ruled by Hades, Pluto, the ruler of the end of the world, it's very susceptible to things like parasites. Okay. And in fact, a lot of people who've got a heavy dose of Scorpio energy in their natal chart, they deal with a lot of parasite issues. Okay. So first of all, I was going to mention olive leaf. Olive leaf is really good for getting rid of the bad stuff, but keeping the good stuff around. If you like something a little more intense, I really like taking something called RUG. RUG. It stands for Remove Unwanted Guests. I'll put a link for that in the description below. That's just really overall good blend of stuff to flush the whole system out. But see, here's the deal. When we're trying to work on cleansing the body or detoxing the body, which this, again, as soon as this moon starts to wane, it's a good time to do that. But for some people, especially if, just depending on your natal chart, what can happen is a lot of people have a good amount of Scorpio energy in their natal chart. The colon can get blocked up. And what happens is the toxic toxicity from your colon leaks into the bloodstream. And then that leads to things like rashes and acne and that sort of thing. So the reason I'm putting so much emphasis on this, because we're getting all this kind of energy through this transit. So, and I was going to talk about something called oxy powder, which is really good. They're capsules. It's from a company called Global Healing, which I've had really good experiences with, like flushing out, the lower part of the intestines, flushing out the colon, just getting everything freshly cleaned out. And that's the deal. If you're taking some kind of anti-parasite herb, and you're having a blocked up colon, then you're going to be your blood's going to be filled with toxins. So if you are taking the anti-parasite stuff, it is a good idea to make sure that the colon is being flushed out too. So the oxy powder can be really good for that. But on that same note, because the colon is going to become more sensitive when the moon's transiting through the sign of Scorpio, some people might need to be a little careful if you're taking any kind of laxative or anything like that. It might be overkill. Okay. So just be very careful with that. And I also need to say this, I am not a doctor. I do not claim to be a doctor, but these are things that I have learned from all different kinds of teachers, from nutrition courses, from medical astrology, and not only that, but experience for myself. I don't talk about stuff unless I've experienced it for myself. Okay. So there's that. I feel like there was another herb I was going to mention, olive leaf. There was the oxy powder. Oh, geez. I wish I could remember what it was. If it comes to me before I'm done here, I'll bring it back up. Okay. Oh, well, that's good enough. Now I was going to mention gemstones. Okay. So the dedicated zodiacal birthstone for the sign of Scorpio is topaz. Now, topaz is beautiful. Unfortunately, I don't have any topaz, but that's okay. I've got plenty of other stones that resonate well with the sign of Scorpio. But I will say this, if you do have a topaz, you might want to be a little bit careful, because it is a very, very powerful stone. Some topaz, depending on the color and all sorts of things, it can create some kind of restrictions, can kind of bring obstacles, that sort of thing. But then for some other people, it could actually decrease swelling and bring down inflammation, that sort of thing. So topaz is not necessarily, unless you know for sure, it's not necessarily my number one top recommended stone for wearing on the body, especially during this kind of transit. But you can always take the topaz and again, put it on top of the journal instead of wearing it on your body. Okay. So there's that. But I always leave a full extensive list, like 20 or 30 stones that resonate well, specifically with the sign that the moon is transiting through. So you can always look in the description below. But some I thought I would mention here. Okay, so this right here is shungite, which is one of my favorite stones. Shungite is so powerful for detoxing, but also it's very, very protective. In fact, almost every time I'm on any device, I'd be sure and pick this thing up, because I love the pyramid shape. I've got other pieces of shungite, but I really like this piece. So shungite really resonates well with the sign of Scorpio, especially if you want to stay protected. And not only that, but with all that Uranus opposing the moon and being conjunct the sun, we could be very well susceptible or extra susceptible to things like dangerous electromagnetic fields. Okay. So there's that. Now, also another one to mention here is something called larvacite, which is not so common, but boy, is it beautiful. Okay. A very protective stone. It actually works similarly to shungite. I think the larvacite's a little more affordable, beautiful stone. Sometimes like this is just a mostly black and gray, and it's super shiny. That video is not really picking up how shiny it is, but larvacite works similarly, very, very protective, and can also enhance psychic capabilities. Okay. That was actually a gift from my dad and my lovely stepmother. Okay. Now the other one I was going to mention, this is like good old reliable right here. Malachite resonates very, very well with the sign of Scorpio. Okay. And in fact, I didn't even really know this until about, I don't know, maybe a year ago or so, that I learned from Judith Hill from the Academy from Astrological Medicine, that it really, it's a good stone for almost every single person. It's very, very protective, but it's also gentle, and it very specifically can be good for all the scorpionic influences. Okay. Malachite, personally, this is one, I mean, there's probably a list of 10, but I could probably get up to 20 stones that I would say are all, you know, good for everybody and highly recommended for everybody's household or your home, that sort of thing. Malachite is definitely on that top 10 list, maybe even on top 3. Malachite is so beautiful. The green in it, not like that, but it was also, I think, the #1 recommended stone, or at least one of the #1 recommended stones by Edgar Cayce. Okay, so there's that. And the other herb did not come to my mind, so I apologize for that. I really wish it did, but I apologize. There's so many things you could do to work on these parts of our body. Again, just be very, very careful with this kind of transit. And also on this last little note here, keep in mind, I don't recommend that anybody be outside trying to watch an eclipse happen. I don't even recommend being outside in the hours surrounding an eclipse, but this is happening in, at least in the Pacific time zone. This is at, 10:30 in the morning. So it might be just a good idea to kind of keep yourself inside, or if you are outside, then just envision a, gold or white light around yourself to keep yourself protected. But then in the hours after this, in the evening time of the night, on the May 5th evening, could actually be a really lovely time, a very magnetic time, a very transformational time. So there's my thoughts on that. Okay, I'm going to leave that there. If you would like to schedule a reading, again, please visit erinwageastrology.com. If you are on a phone or a tablet, there's 3 little lines at the top. Just look for those. That's a menu bar. Click there and it'll say book online. It's very, very easy from there. Okay, guys, I do hope to hear from some of you. And until next time, namaste to all of you.